Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. This is day 5 of Oracle integration training. In this session, we will cover app-driven integration and we will see the parameters of app-driven integration. So while covering all these things, we will go through the difference between app-driven and the schedule integration, which we already created in our previous session. And we'll see that basic differences between that. We'll see that how we can add parameters in app-driven integration as we already done the parameters in schedule integration. So we'll discuss about that, and also we will cover about that the basic canvas of Oracle integration, basic navigations and all that, what all actions are available there and how we can use. So in upcoming sessions, day by day, we will use a few of that actions, and based on that, we can perform operations in our Oracle integrations. And in last, we will cover two more topics, which will include that OIC editions, that what offering Oracle provides when we are buying the Oracle cloud subscription. And that's obvious we have that standard and enterprise, and they one more added for the healthcare. So we'll see that one too. And in last, we will have the limitations. We will see that what limitations available in Oracle integration in terms of integrations and in terms of using connection in OIC. So I have listed few of that the limitations for services. We'll discuss on that too. So let's start with the first. So we'll see that what's the differences between app driven and schedule. So we already know that when we are talking about schedule integration, so this is synchronous integration where we are not expecting to return any response from that integration. And yes, so when we were talking about app-driven integration, so app-driven integration can be synchronous, and obviously it can be asynchronous too, where we will not return any of the value from integration as a response payload. And also the main part we are covering when we are discussing about app-driven and schedule integration, the part is that how much time that both can be active or both can be in the running state. So, app-driven integration having the time limitation of 300 seconds only, which is 5 minutes. And it's not app-driven integration, it's app-driven synchronous integration. So when we are talking about synchronous integration, it means that we will create app-driven integration, which will return some value in response. So when any of the integration is returning some value in response, we are saying that integration is a synchronous integration. Sorry. And we already know that schedule integration cannot return any values, so which is by default asynchronous. And the maximum time of interval it can be running in running status, it is 6 hours. So the same way, when app-driven integration will be created and it will not return any value, it will be asynchronous, and it can also go up to 6 hours of running time. So that's the slight differences. One more differences in app-driven and schedule is in app-driven integration, we can trigger that integration from any third-party system to start the execution. But in schedule integrations, for schedule integrations, we have scheduler, which by using that scheduler, we can set that integration to be executed on a specific time interval. So that's a basic differences in app-driven and schedule. And in next topic, we will cover about the parameters. So allow me 1 minute, huh? So when we're talking about parameters, parameter is something that value we are passing to that application. So same as we created schedule integration earlier, and in schedule integration, we added parameters to pass runtime value to that integration. So that integration can utilize that values in the integration and they can perform operations accordingly. The same way in our app-driven integration also, we can add parameters. In app-driven integrations, Oracle provide two kinds of parameters. So when we are talking about two kinds of parameters, so it's when we are using in app-driven integration, REST connection we are using as a trigger, and it means that app-driven integration is going to be exposed as a REST API. I will show you that in upcoming session. So that integration can have two different parameters. The one parameter, so first parameter is review parameters, and which is also known as template parameters. And another parameter is query parameter. So we will see that what's the differences between both. So both parameters are using in integrations to provide runtime values, and by using these parameters, we can generate runtime URL for that specific integrations or the REST endpoint. So that's we are going to cover. So let's first talk about the review parameters. So here if you see, this is simple integrations, a screenshot which I added here. So in integrations, when we are creating, and if you remember previously we created integration which doesn't have any parameters. So in this request tab in URI parameter, we are not able to see any values. But as in our integration, I added three parameters. So all these three parameters are listed here, and we have to provide the value for all these three parameters. And all these three parameters will be reflected in URL. So this is a URL of the integration. So this is not actually URL. This is URI of the integration. That's the identifier. So for this, whenever we are adding parameters in our app-driven integration, that parameters is going to be added in URI, and that URI, based on that URI, it will generate the URI at a runtime. And runtime, when we are saying at runtime, so whatever value we will pass in these parameters, it will reflect in the URL. So that value will make this parameters or this URL as a dynamic at runtime. Whatever value we will pass, whatever value we will pass, it will make that OIC URL on that way based on that value only. For example, here you can see there are two blocks. The first block you can see the value or the name of parameter is in the bracket, right? The curly braces num underscore one and num underscore two. The same value you are able to see here, right? This is the first parameter. This is the second parameters. And another parameters you can see that p underscore operations equals and empty, right? So because we have not provided any values here, that's why it's empty. So now while running this integration, whatever value we will provide here, that all values will duplicate here. So as you can see, this is query parameters or this is review parameters. That review parameters is reflecting in integrations URL or the API URL. And that will be, and in this review parameters, there will not be any parameters names. But in query parameters, there will be parameters name, just like question mark p underscore operation is the parameter's name, and whatever value you will pass, that value will that added after this equals to. And in OIC, combination of all these two parameters will be known as URI parameters, because this is the URI of that integration. And in this URI, we have these parameters. That's why these parameters combined called as URI parameters. And the parameters which is having the value at runtime and value added in that URL or URI, whatever you can consider, that's known as a review or template parameters. And query parameter is something that in our URL, it's going to be concatenate. So that is known as query parameters. So let's discuss about few things. So once we will provide the value, I told you, once we will provide the value here, that value will be reflected in the URL, right? So in the next slide, if you will see here, so for adding that values, obviously in our integrations, we have REST endpoint, that REST connection we are adding. And like you saw that yesterday we created integration where we added that the REST connection in our integration. So in the REST connection, we have to provide that the if someone is saying something, I'm not able to hear this. Okay. So here you can see this is the endpoint. We have to provide the endpoint name. And after that, you can see there is one point we skipped yesterday and we given just like addition and all. And here we have they asking for the relative URL or the users URL. And here you can see this num underscore one and num underscore these two value we provided in the bracket. This is the same two value which it is reflecting here in the URL of the integration. I'm not able to hear you completely even. Maybe there is some issue with the sound. Who is speaking? Okay, let me check. So I want to know this. Who is this 1998? No, everyone is mute right now. Okay, now. So that's why I don't want to discuss like why expand. It's creating problem. So now here. Yeah, so here you can see these two parameters are reflecting here and both value of the parameters is reflecting in the URL too. So how we can configure our integration to display these these two review parameters. So when we are adding that we are adding the REST endpoint or the REST connection as a trigger. So there we are getting option to add the resource URI and where we are providing anything which is going to be reflect in the URL. Yesterday it was addition only. So now after that I added two parameters. So to add the URI parameters or the template parameters, it's simple that in the URL only while providing this relative URL, you can just provide the value in the bracket. So curly braces. So here you can see I provided the value in curly braces num1 and num2. And when we provided values in the curly braces, automatically this will be tick mark, right? You can see add and review parameters for this endpoint. So it will automatically make a tick when you will provide that value here, the any parameters here. So in the just next step, when once you will go, you will be able to see that the parameters, these two parameters here. And also in that page, in the configuration of the request parameter page, you will get option to add the new parameters. So when we are talking about adding a new parameter, so this will be query parameters. You can see specify query parameters on the configure and request parameters page, the configuration page. And these two parameters num_1, num_2 are available here as a template parameters, which we given by adding the in the URL. So this is the differences between template parameters and the query parameters. And I told you I will show you one of the screenshot and then we will go for practical and we'll see how we can add all these things. So when you will add all these parameters will be available in OIC in your mapper. So this is the same which we discussed that these parameters are there and in these parameters are reflecting in that resource URI. And once we provide any of the value here in these parameters, that value reflect in that URL only. So here you can see in that num1 and num2, as these two were the template parameters, template parameter is something that is going to be added in the URL only. So num1 and num2 were the template parameters where this bracket and variable name or the parameter name replaced with the value which we were passing. You can see in that number we passes 10, in number 2 we passes 20 and this 10 and 20 is replaced here. Are you able to see 10/20 which is same as that num_1 num_2 and you can see in the parameters for this query parameters we given them name as p_operations and we provided the value as asterisk for multiplication and this value we are able to see here in this URL itself. You can see p_operations is equals to asterisk, right? So in case of template parameters, this the variable parameters name got replaced with the value, but in case of query parameters, the value got appended with the name of the parameters with adding the questions mark and the value before equals. So that's the differences and identification of these two parameters in OIC. And as I told you that when we are combining all these two parameters and all, so all these parameters relatively consider as a URI parameters when we are talking about this URL. So in this URL, these two are URI parameters, and when we will define this URI parameters, then it will these two 10 and 20 will be template parameters or review parameters, and this p_underscore operation equals to asterisk will be query parameters. And now when we are providing the parameters, that parameters value will be available in Oracle integration in mapping so that you can utilize this parameters value in your integrations and whatever operations you want to perform, you can perform that operations. So you can see whenever you are opening any of that the mapper. So in the mapper, the left hand side is the source, and in source you will be able to find this values. You can see under template parameters we have num1 and num2, and under query parameters we have operations. And obvious in this all this value you can map in the target side. We will discuss that too. So now once we're done with these parameters, so we are going to be on discuss related to the canvas or integration generation 3 design view, where we will see that this is the page where we are doing our integration design. This is the page where we can change the style as horizontal or verticals. And yes, this is the main point where we are adding our actions. If you remember, we added the logger from this actions list only, and on this side having that flexibility where we can pick the connections, actions, any error messages, global variable and all. We will cover all these things in upcoming sessions too. And yes, here in the above we have option where we can get the settings option. So this middle one is the one where we can add the business identifier. This is the setting where we can change the integrations name and all. In upcoming days we will cover all these things. So let's move to the instance, and we will create our app driven integration where we will add few of the parameters, and we'll see how it is going to work. So this is our OIC instance. And one more request I want to like I have from all of you, that whatever integrations you are going to create, please make sure that you deleted all the integrations after practice. Right, it will be very too much complex or difficult to see all these integrations right here. If anyone got any issues, they will be got confused and all. So after the session, I will provide you one code. So you all can use that code in starting of your integrations. For example, in my integration, I am using code as FOAS. I will assign you a code, list of code I will give you all of participant, and you can use that code while creating your integration so that you can easily identify your integrations. And once you're done, you can delete your integration. So that way, in that way, you will not delete integration by created by any other team members, right? For example, if you will blindly go and try to delete, it can be possible that I can delete integrations created by other team members, and it can create problem. So whenever you will create any connections, any integrations, you will use that naming convention. For example, I will give naming convention XX01 to Malik, or XX02 to Malika, or something like that. So they will use that one so that whenever they want, they can just go search with FOAS and with their code, and all the integrations created by him, they will it will reflect here, and they can delete that integration, or if they want to take export, they can take export of that integrations. So it's my personal suggestion. Please follow that one in the next session. And like after today's session only, I'm going to remove all the integrations created here. Right. So please make sure that you can create you create integrations from scratch with that your naming code only. So now we have to create our app-driven integration. So before creating app-driven integrations, we know that in app-driven integration, we are not getting any endpoint there. So we have to add the endpoint. For adding the endpoint only, last time we created connection, and that connection we created different connections like XX REST connection, which is for trigger, trigger and invoke. All that kind of connection we created, right? So we will use that connection in our integration. So let's move to the integration part. And in integrations, we have to create. So I will click on this create button, and here I will select as application. So in generation 2 it was app driven, but in generation 3 it is application, so don't be confused in that. So I will use FOAS, that is for Oracle App Solutions, and there is code. I will give the code as int001 underscore. This will be app driven integration, so I will use AP underscore what kind of perform operation this integration is going to perform. So this integration is going to perform or just display the value, whatever value we will pass. So we'll say that parameters one. So now this is our integration name, parameters, let me add underscore one so that we can easily identify the name. This is identifier automatically coming. If you want to change the identifier, you can change by here. So let me remove the underscore from this name, that's identifier. This is the version. I don't want to do anything. In session, I will explain about the version, then we'll discuss on that. Now I will click on create. So once I will click on the create, integration will be created and our page canvas will be displayed, and we don't have any endpoint. So here we have to add the endpoint. So just I will click on this plus, I will select the connection. So I created connection as FOAS and the created connection as trigger, trigger invoke, and it was earlier connection. So I will use trigger connection here. And when we are going to add connections, it asking for the endpoint name. So I will give the endpoint name as start. And this is REST type endpoint. That's why I will use REST. Now this endpoint is done. This is the basic brief. You want to add, you can skip. I will go to next. And now here it asking that the URI. And in the message also you can see the example of that UI is this is the order is the UI and this is the review parameters or template parameters added here. So the same way I will add the parameters here. So I will add the parameters slash app driven slash I will give the name as developer name. So I given the review parameters as developer name. And here we have to select the options that operations, which operations is going to perform. So as this integration is not going to perform anything, so we can make a get, post, anything. So generally I will go for post as I already explained. When we will use post, so we will have option to use that configure and request and response payload, which we will, when I will use when I will add request and response payload, then we will use these 2 point. I will skip as of now. And here you can see when we added this parameters, that the template parameters, it's automatically added a tick here. Selected the tick that is add a requirement. It means that we cannot remove this one. Why? We cannot remove because it's already we added one parameters, right? So when you will select here, then only you will be able to see the configuration for this endpoint, right? So it's selected here, that's review parameters. So when we will go next, we will get option to see the parameters configuration page. So I'm just going to click on continue without providing any other details. And once we are going to continue, here you can see it's showing the details that the operation is default name and the resource URI is the app driven and this is the developer name. At whatever value we will pass at runtime, this value will be changed. And now here you can see the parameters we added, that is developer name. That parameters you are able to see here, developer name, right? And the values is string, you can change to integer, you can change to double floats and all. So I will go for a string only so that it can take any of the values. And now here you can see we have one more option to specify a query parameters. So right now I will skip the query parameters. I will add query parameters in next integration. So now click on continue. So once you will continue, it will move to that summary page and where you can see the basic details of the integration. It got removed. So that's the issue with generation tree, right? Your cursor will move anywhere, that endpoint will be good. So now I have to reload the integration page again. Again, when I will load, it will open in view mode. Again, I have to go back and I have to edit the integration. So yeah, it's open. So let me add that connection. So I will use FOA as trigger one. I will give the endpoint name as a start rest. Continue. I will provide the URI here, that is app driven, and I use that developer name, right? This is the URI. Parameters, the method I will select at post, and you can see it's automatically added here. That's fine. Go next. Just review the parameters for the connection parameters you added. So this developer name template parameters already added here. I type as a string. Continue. And in the summary page, you can see summary page, you will be able to see the details you added. So you REST service URI, that is slash app driven, and the developer name, that is parameters, and the method is post. So just I will go and finish. Once you will finish, you will be able to see these two endpoint. So these two endpoint are, the first endpoint is the REST endpoint, which is going to be considered as a trigger, and this will start our integration. This is the stop integration, as I don't want to return any values. That's why it's a stop here. And I want to display the message, whatever user will send as a parameter. So let me add the logger here. I will change the logger name. name and plus for logger. And here you can see in the template parameters, once you will expand, this is the source, right? In the input source, this is the under the execute, you will see the template parameters, you will see the connecting properties, connectivity properties. Connectivity properties also contain few values. We'll cover later. And now you can see this is the developer name, this is the parameters we added. So I will drag this parameters here. So whatever value we will drag, it will display. So I want to concatenate some values. So I want to concatenate. So concate is a function, right? So what I want to concate, I want to concate like I want to concat that is the I want to display message like the developer name is, and here will be the value, whatever value we will pass at runtime. So suppose we want to pass values as the developer name is foxf. I want to display this message. So this is the value which will we get from, this is the value we will get at a runtime, and this is the hard coded value, that is the fixed value. So we have one function in OIC, that is concat. This concat function is responsible for merging multiple values. So our first values is this one. So I will take this value here in the single quotes, that will be considered as a string value, and by providing comma, this is the second values, right? This is the second value, and this value will come at runtime from the parameter. So I will drag the value here. So I will just copy this concat function, go to here, I will remove this one. This is the value I added. Now after this comma, right, if you are able to see, after this comma, I have to drag the developer name. So I will drag this developer name here. You can see the developer name drag added here after the comma, right? This is the path of that variable, right? The template variable, you can see execute. Inside the execute we have template parameter, inside the execute we have template parameter, inside the template parameter we have the name, developer name, inside the template parameter we have the name parameter, which is developer name. So that's we added. Just click here to make sure that the mapping is correct, and now just click outside so that it will be saved, the mapping will be saved. And now you can see it got saved. So just we have to save the integration. And yes, when you will save the integration, again you will get an error. So it's quite simple that each and every integration requires one business identifier, which we have to provide. So I will click here to add business identifier. And if you will expand here, you will be able to see the parameters. I'm going to use these parameters only for the business identifier. So that by the name only we can search the integration, we can track the one, right? Click save, right, and go back. So our integration is done. In configure status, I will go back and activate the integration. So now I'm just going to activate the integration. So now integration is activated. Let me run this integration. To run the integration, just click on this three dot, and here you will get one option to run. Click here. And here you can see we added one parameters. In the request, we have the URI parameters, and URI parameters having the parameters name as developer name. And as we have not provided any value here, so you can see in AppDriven, after AppDriven, we have the developer name. So whenever we provide any value, that will be replaced by the value which we provide. So I'm just going to provide the foxdev, and you can see that foxdev got replaced in URL only. So this got the dynamic URL, right? This is our URL of our integration. So once you will run this URL using Postman, or when you will hit this REST API using any API execution tool, so this will be the dynamic URL, and this foxdev value will be passed to the integration. So now I am going to click on run. So once I click on the run, this value will be passed to the integration. And here you can see in response, we are not getting anything because we have not configured the response payload. So in integration, you can see this is the trigger endpoint which added in the trigger endpoint. So this is the mapper for that, which is displaying that what value it's passing. So you can see in the trigger endpoint, these all are the value we passed, right? So if you will copy here this value, it will go to the notepad. If you will pass here, it will change the, here you can see the same value, the parameters we added. The template parameters name is developer name, and this is the value for this template parameters. If I will make it small, you can see value for the template parameters, and this is the method of your integration. This is the URL of your integration. This is the REST URL that you can run this URL using any API execution tool. And this is the URI for the integration or for the REST endpoint. And this is the path. So this is the path, this is the URI, and this is the integration instance that till API. So all this combined will make that REST endpoint. So these are the basic details, and obvious these details we are going to use. So I'm going to use these details in our integration mapper, so which we use that is developer name. So now this execution done, and once you will see the logger display developer name underscore logger, once you will click here, you will be able to see the value. The developer name is Foxdev. At runtime, if I will change the value as Divya Goyal, anything. So once you will click on run, you will be able to see the value here in the URL, that's that AppDriven slash Divya Goyal, and the same value as we used to display the log message. So you will see in the log. So once I will click here, you can see you're able to see the developer name is Divya. So this is all about the review parameters or the template parameters. Let's move to the integration, and we will add one more parameters here, and the parameters we will use as a query parameters. So instead of making clone of this integration or copy of integration, I will create again the integration because I didn't discuss on the cloning of the integration. So I will cover the two next. So I will give the name as FOAS. What was the name? FOAS underscore AP or int001. It was earlier, it was int001 AP. I will change the name to 2 and I will make as 2. So just click on create. So our integration will be created. And here again, we have to add the endpoint. So I will just click here. I will select our connection, that is FOAS. And this is the connection which we created, the trigger one. And I will give the endpoint name here as again a start REST, that this endpoint is going to start our integration. And this is REST connection integration. That's why I use a start REST. I will go continue. And here I have to provide the REST URL. So I will select this URL. So here you can see if I provided app driven only. So once we provide app driven only, if you will go below, here you can see the add and review parameters. This tick is not available, right? So as I will add the parameters here, the review parameters, that is the developer name, right? So you can see automatically it will add the tick here. And as here, this is not enabled, right? You are not able to tick or anything. Why? Because, oh, let me add again. So let me first refresh the page. It's really frustrating, the features of this integration. So here I'm going to add a start REST next, and here we have to select the URI. So slash app driven developer name, and it's automatically added here. This is not enabled just because we added the method as get. Get means we are not going to pass any value as a request payload. That's why it's not showing the request one. Get is something that it will return value. That's why it's enable us to provide the option as a return response, right? So I don't want to configure anything. Even get will also work. So let it be the get only. And now here we added, right? So as I have to add the query parameters too, and that query parameters will come into the parameters configurations page. So I will go next. And here this is that the configure request parameters, and in the request parameter you can say specify query parameters. Here we have to specify the query parameters which we want to add. Template parameters or review parameters is already there. So I want to add the parameters here. So I will just click here add, or in the add I want to give the parameters name as, for example, manager name, right? And parameters type I will select as a string. So you can see this is added, right? So if you want to add one more, just click here. So this empty screen, just double click, you will be able to find the option here, right? So I don't want to provide two parameters, so let it be one only. I will remove this one. So I have one query template parameter as a developer name, one query parameter as a manager name. I will just click on continue and done. So now you can see. So here this time we are able to see this as return. It's not as a stop. So maybe it's because that we selected method as a get. So here we selected method as a get and get giving this option so that we can return values or not. So let me select post also only. Later we will go for continue. I don't want to do any changes here in the parameters handle which already there. Continue and finish. So apply changes. Now you can see that mapper got removed. And here this is our endpoint. I want to display the parameters whatever we given in the log message. So again I will add the logger here. So I will add the logger here. And in the logger, what kind of value we want to display? So we want to display value like this one in a single logger only. So I want to display the developer name is this one. So the developer name is this one, whatever it will give, and will provide the value as and which manager is this one. So whatever value will be like Mr. X, right? So here you can see in this value, this is the fixed value that is hard coded value. And again, taking from a space, this is the fixed value, and this value will come from the parameters. So what we will do, this is our concat function. So concat function is using to merge two values to a string or more than two strings. So I will use concat. Here, this is our first value. So I will use this one here in the single string quotes, comma, second value. The second value, this is second value, and this value will be replaced at runtime by parameters. So just for sample or just for understanding, I am going to use equal equals here. I will remove this one in the mapper and I will provide the parameters name here. This one, comma, and again after that from a space to this space, this is hard coded values. Again, I will go hard coded value will be in the single quotes, and after that we have to provide this the runtime value that will coming from parameters. So again I will give comma, and this parameters again I'm going to use anything. You can use a star, you can dot, anything, and I will remove this dot, right? So I'm just going to use LLM and now bracket. So here this equals to LLL. This is dummy value, dummy character I given so that I can just explain you things here. So at runtime, this will be the developer name is this. I am going to replace now with the parameters, the whatever value we will pass, and his manager is this value I'm going to replace with the parameters. So it will display like that. So let me copy this one, go to the mapper, and here I told you this is the equals, right? So this equals I'm going to remove. So just edit here. This equals I'm going to remove from the parameters. That's here I am selected, right? I'm selecting here. Don't be confused. So this I am going to select. So template parameters, expand. This is developer name, right? So here when you will select this value and you will drag the value here, so the selected value will be removed and replaced by the value which we are mapping, right? So you can see equals to is replaced by this endpoint, right? And this is the developer name from the execute template parameters and developer name. Execute template parameters and developer name. Now here we have to replace this LLL, or we have to change this LLL. Just select here, expand this query parameters, and you will be able to see the manager name. So drag manager name here. So yeah, you can see this got changed, right? So this goes change if you will move to the notepad here. So let me click here to make it fix. You can see it got fixed, right? The developer name is, this is the parameters name, and his manager is, this is the parameters name, right? So the way we also learned that concat function. So just click outside. So what kind of value it's going to create? So it's going to create the developer name is, this will be replaced at runtime by OIC with the value we will provide. So we will provide, for example, Fox Dev, and his manager is, this is the parameters, and these parameters will be replaced at runtime. So it will be Mr. X, whatever we will pass. So this will be the value it will display, right? So let's go to the integration. So we have to just add that, remove the error just by adding the business identifier. So this is the business identifier. Let me add the first business identifier as a developer name, second business identifier as a manager name. It's not mandatory to provide two, but just for reference, I'm providing these two. And here you can see the variable business identifier, a tracking variable name is tracking underscore var1. You can change this variable name right here. So this is the tracking one variable, and here you can see developer name is the variable name of the tracking. So you can change. So I will make as developer developer name, and this is the second tracking variable where name is manager. So I will make it manager a space name. So this is the name I given to the business identifier, right? Tracking variable 2 having the business name manager name, tracking variable 1 having the developer name as a business identifier. Just click outside so that it can be saved. Click on save. So now our integration is in configure status. I will go back to activate the integration. Now our integration, here you can see it's in configure. I have to activate. So just click on this power button, select the tracing level, click on activate. So now we activated integration. We have to run the integration. Just click here, this part. Click here, click on this run button, run in tab. And here you can see these two parameters are there, right? Developer name and manager name. Right. Even you can see one more important things I forget to add or highlight. This the review parameters or template parameters is mandatory. You have to pass. You cannot escape that part. But the query parameters is optional. Here you can see we have the option. If you will remove the tick, this value will not be passed to the URL. You can see this is not displaying here. If you will tick here, that then this value will be reflect here, right? So that's the one more differences between the query parameters and the review parameters. Here, let me provide the name as Zafar and manager name is Mr. X. So this is the value I want to provide. So here you can see Zafar added in the URL and that the value, the query parameter is added with the query parameters name to the manager name. You can see question mark manager name equals to the manager name we provided. And here in the URL, a space is going to replace by this the specific value that is percentage 22. Percentage 22 is it equals to a space in the URL, right? So this is the value. So let me run this integration. So once I will run, this two value will be passed to OIC and OIC will display the message in the log, which we added, right? So here, once you will click on that one. So this time we forget to change the name of logger. So this is showing logger one. Once you will click here, you will be able to see the developer name is Zafar and his manager is X, right? Same value can be replaced when we will pass value here. So I will give the name as developer name is Nagarjun and manager is Sanpet Sunil. And now if you will click on this run, this two value will be passed and same this two value you are able to see in this URL that Nagarjun and manager name is equal to Sanket Sunil. And here you can see once you will click on logger, you will be able to see the same value. So that's the benefit of using parameters in integration so that we can provide a runtime value to the integration. There is one more option to provide runtime value to the integration that is request payload. So parameter is something that we have to provide value one by one, and payload is something that we can provide unstructured value. So we'll cover in that one in upcoming session. So here in this session, we learned that how we can add parameters in our integration. That parameters can be that review parameters, and it can be that the query parameters. So yeah, let's end for today. The remaining part, the OIC edition and the overview of the integration page and all, we will cover in the next session. So thank you so much everyone for joining the session. If you have any other queries and you want to ask, yes, feel free to raise your hand and you can ask your queries. I'm going to unmute yours to you, right? So